Hey everyone, so although it's only 4 of you, I'm supposed to have 11, tapi it's okay lah. I just start the video, I will just start the teaching, and then you can ask your friends to watch the video. Okay, I also not sure why design this semester the attendance are very poor, and sometimes I have to wait. Tapi tak apalah, I already said once. I also don't want to say it too many times. So I will start with the class for today, right? So basically today lecture will be the last lecture for part 1. So meaning by next week you have about 3 or 4 weeks where you will not have any class. So you can use the lecture time to actually concentrate on your project lah. So at least you have 3 hours per week that you can really work on your design, as well as you will have additional 30 minutes, extra 30 minutes that can be used for consultation. Of course, if you need any extra consultation, you are so much more welcome to contact me so that we can set the appointment time for the consultation. Okay, so actually I know that when I do the lecture, it sounds very generous. Sebab as I told you guys, memang I cannot. It's hard in terms of plant design because every project has its own, how do I say, needs. Have its own boundaries, so on and so forth. So the lecture is as a guideline for you to consider factors that might be affected by your plant, but not necessarily everything will be affected. Not necessarily everything will be affected by these factors that I discussed. Okay, so my concern is when student don't turn up for the lecture, you don't listen to the lecture, and then if tak apa kalau lepas tu you refer to the notes, okay, so I don't have to worry too much. But when you don't listen, you don't come for the class, I didn't mean you guys, kesian juga because actually you guys turn up for the lecture, but please tell your friends that if you don't turn up for the lecture, it's okay. I won't force as well, but make sure that you check the notes, make sure that you check the video, okay? Sebab as I told you, design memang basically is a fully student-centered course. I'm here just to guide you as well as to supervise you. Okay, so I hope in that sense that tak attend tak apa, tapi make sure catch up by yourself when you have time, because the project is really heavy project, and by listening to this, then at least you dah tak payah spend additional time to just catch up on it. Okay, so the last part is actually on each safety issue and environmental impact. So now we are talking about how do we consider the safety issue and how the environmental impact of your plant. Okay, so again, the same concept applies. Not necessarily everything is everything is relevant to your plant, but you may have to actually consider all these when you are discussing about your plant. So please tell your friends who doesn't come for the class, this environmental impact and safety issue must be discussed specifically to your plant. Means you cannot just discuss in general, or perhaps if you take from the internet or you take from reference books, okay, you will just discuss it generally. Cannot. You must discuss in particularly to your plant. Meaning, if let's say your plant is, you have to identify what kind of let's say in terms of safety, what kind of the safety issue that might be raised in particularly to your plant. Similarly, environmental impact. So you need to identify what are your side products, what are the hazardous chemicals that you may use, so on and so forth. Okay, so just remember, when you discuss this for your design project, it's not in general, but it must be reported particularly towards your plant. Okay, all right, so there are many environmental consideration, okay, that you have to consider. So these are the main ones: waste management, noise, visual impact, emission to land, air or water, smell, other nuisance, and environmental friendliness of the project. Of the product. Okay, when we talk about waste management, that's why I told you to discuss waste management in your report, you have to specifically know what kinds of waste produced from your plant. Okay, so it's very important to know particularly what kind of waste is produced from your plant So of course, it's not only waste in the sense of side product. You may also have unused reactant. Okay, that's why in the plant, we try to recycle as much as possible your reactant, because if you do not recover, you did not recycle, it will be waste. Okay, so you know waste incurred cost, right? Next, off spec product which is off specification. So you must remember, it's very rarely the plant will be able to maintain the quality of the product. Okay, meaning purity, concentration, so on and so forth. So you will have product which is off the specification, which is deemed as waste. Okay. Next, when you are dealing with liquids and gas, especially in continuous process, you may have leaking seals and flanges as well as improper operation. So you know, right? If your gas, especially liquid, like the continuous system, and you are pumping it, if you have leakage, so if you have leakage, the liquid will leak out. So the liquid will leak out from your plant. That is also waste. Okay. Then emergency vents are protected by bursting disc and relief valve can discharge material to the atmosphere. So you know that most of the equipment, if you are working on high pressure equipment, you will have what we call as bursting disc and relief valve. So why do you have this bursting disc and relief valve is because, let's say if your equipment suffers from overpressure, so this is an important safety aspect so that the emergency vent can blow up. So you will release the pressure so that you will not have too high pressure in the equipment that may cause explosion. But of course, when this burst, of course you will release the material to the atmosphere. That is also considered as waste. So basically anything that comes out from produced from the plant, not any throughout the process, sepanjang proses tu sebarang pengeluaran ataupun the release of chemicals, we also deem it as waste. Okay, so you must actually consider all these pollution sources. So kamu kena consider part mana yang boleh berlaku leakage, part mana yang boleh berlaku explosion, because you have to prepare certain kind of design. Not prepare, you have to make sure the design are protected. The designs are there to protect all these waste issue. Okay, so you want to have a better guide on waste minimization. So let's say for your plant, you want to have a strategies to minimize waste. You may go to this guide. So in this guide, they will actually give you a good suggestion. They will give you good practices on how to minimize waste. Okay, right. So besides identifying the source of the waste, you may consider also how do you going to reduce the waste. So it's also important that you consider what are the ways we can reduce the waste generation. So one, of course, I told you, unused reactant and off-spec product can be recycled. So that's why most of the time they will recycle unused reactant, because again, unused reactant are money. Okay, next. Selling waste as a raw material to another company. So that's what some of your senior projects did last time. They identify customer for their side product. So in their report, they reported, okay, let's say I'm producing my side product is, let's say, acetone. Okay, so they say they identify, they are customers. They even mention what are the companies that they identify as customer that will purchase their side product. So that's their strategy, how to minimize side product, how to minimize waste by selling their side product. So please remember for your report as well, that is what you will do. You have to mention specifically. You cannot just mention in general selling waste as raw material. That one will not be accepted. But if you can identify clearly what's your raw side product, who's your potential customer, then that will be accepted. Okay. Next. Automation and alarm built into process and equipment to reduce error. So one of the way, of course, by having alarm, having automation, you can control the process better. So you know if there's overpressure ke, or if you know there's a change of temperature ke, flow rate ke, you can already adjust, you can already control this to prevent the formation of off-spec product, overpressure, so on and so forth. Then what about leaks? So you know, right, just like we talk about leaking from the piping system, from the seals, so on. So you can actually make sure that the leaks are flown into the plant's effluent collection system rather than directly into sewers. So you have a special collection system. You build a system where all this leakage will go to the effluent collection system. Okay, so meaning then the treatment of it will be easier in comparison kalau you let it go into the sewers. Okay, next, spill should be retained in hold-up system, tank and ponds for treatment. So if let's say you have you are dealing with hazardous chemical, you cannot just simply flow it to the drain or so on and so forth. I think you have learned safety, right? So you must have a special proper storage tank to store it, or you have a pond. If you have a treatment pond, that's why for those yang buat on the plant layout, site layout yesterday, you have to actually discuss with students who are doing on this environmental impact. So you have to discuss, you have to ask, okay, what kind of waste the plant will produce, and what will you guys do? Are we going to build a pond system, or are we going to do a tank, so on and so forth? So let's say student 4 decided that we are going to do, let's say, we are going to have a treatment plant. We have a pond, treatment pond. So means group student 3 yang buat plan layout tu, dia dah dalam site layout tu, dia dah kena identify dalam dia punya site layout tu, where will they place their treatment pond. So that's why I say, although this is a individual work, but actually some of the things you have to discuss so that it looks very consistent in the report. So katakan group student 4 kata kena ada treatment pond, then I will check student 3 dalam site layout dia tak ada pun treatment pond. So this means that the thing is not consistent lah. Okay, so next, joints. So flange joints should be kept to a minimum for equipment assembly and maintenance. So this flange joints is the one that always will cause leakage and spillage. So when they tend to have a spillage, so this is cause also of waste lah in the system. Okay, now just now is to reduce the waste. Now you are talking about what do we do to treat the waste. So tadi kita cakap pasal potential waste punya source. We talk about how to minimize waste. Sebab kita nak as possible reduce first, minimize dulu waste. But now if you cannot avoid it, we have waste. What do we do? What are the techniques that you can be considered? So again, as I told you, ini adalah teknik general. So you need to choose and decide which treatments or waste strategies that fits to your plant. Okay, so make sure for those yang datang today, please tell your member yang buat part ni, dia tak boleh discuss secara general. Dia kena betul-betul specify apa strategi dia, dan contoh dia mesti ikut plant dia punya chemicals, plant dia punya situation. Okay, so the waste can be for the treatment and waste disposal. It can be either dilution, dispersion, discharge to water sewer, incineration, or landfill at control site. So, for example, katakan you decide you nak hantar to landfill for your plant, you have to specify landfill tu kat mana. So, for example, let's say your plant is in Marang Terengganu. Let's say you have to specify particularly which and where is the land site that you will send your waste. Similarly, kalau nak pergi incineration, where particularly? So you cannot just write in general, the waste will be sent to the landfill. You will not get the marks. The mark will only given if you mention specifically, you identify where's the landfill, and if you can mention how far the landfill from your plant. Okay, so next, let's go to talking about first strategy. Okay, so the strategy of the treatment and waste disposal, you can actually treat it first in your plant. But the treatment depends on either you're doing physical treatment, chemical treatment, or biological treatment. Okay, so let's say now, maknanya part ni, untuk student yang akan buat part ni, kamu kena identify dulu, apakah sebenarnya your waste? As I told you, it can be side product, unconverted reactant, off-spec product. You don't forget, you got also water. You also get sometimes oil, so on and so forth. Okay, so all this you identify clearly. Kalau side product tu apa? Acetone ke, phenol ke, apa? Okay, then have you identified, if you're using solid, you have to identify also what kind of solid. Okay, after you identify, then you decide, should I go physical treatment ke, chemical treatment ke, biological treatment? So kalau physical treatment, it can be scrubbing. So I think got one group, you use a scrubber to remove the sulfuric acid from the water. Use scrubber to remove sulfuric acid because it was the catalyst. So that is one of the way to remove first the sulfuric acid because it's hazardous, acidic kan. So scrubbing. Settling. So I think one of the group, they use a settler to separate the solid and liquid. So that's also one way. Absorption, adsorption, penyerapan, penjerapan. So that's also way. So some of the plant PFD tu dia dah ada sebenarnya that equipment in your plant, in your PFD, which actually serve as a waste management strategy. Okay, next, chemical treatment. So you might want to precipitate if it's a heavy metal, or you might want to neutralize. So let's say for groups yang ada menggunakan acid, one of the way if you want to treat is you neutralize it. So you have to add some alkali lah. So alkali neutralize dah jadi pH 7. It's easier for you to actually flow it out because they are neutral, not a problem. Or you can use biological treatment. So biological treatment is activated slush, so on and so forth. Means you use microorganisms to treat your waste. So kalau macam case macam ni, you have a treatment pond. So you have satu group student 4, you have to discuss with student 3. What are the things? Even student 3, 4 and even student yang buat you also have to discuss on the PFD. So dalam PFD tu macam contohnya if you have to need certain equipment to treat it, it has to also be in the PFD juga. So certain case tu tak semestinya dah sampai belakang baru nak treat. So certain PFD kalau kamu perasan kat tengah-tengah tu ditambah satu equipment. Kenapa? Let's say dia nak neutralize or dia nak settle down, dia nak separate dulu solid, so on and so forth. So there also can be a way. Tak semestinya dah habis proses baru kita nak treat. Okay? Right, so next, what if you deal with gaseous waste? So for those group yang guna syngas, I think there's one group who uses syngas. This can be a problem, tetapi syngas is not so bad because syngas is carbon dioxide, hydrogen, nitrogen is fine, carbon dioxide. So most of the time kalau macam gas-gas yang macam tu, normally they will just purge out, not big problem. But if you're producing toxic gas, then it's not so straightforward. Okay, so you identify gas yang kamu hasilkan. Please identify first, are they toxic and noxious gases or not? If it's, then you cannot just release it into the atmosphere. You have to treat, baru release to the atmosphere. Okay, so some of the way, adsorption. Okay, remove the gases pollutants, scrubbing. So that's why I think certain PFD kamu ada scrubber. So scrubber tu is actually to remove already this toxic and noxious gas before it's released. Okay, kalau kamu ada flammable gas, so gas yang ada carbon, hydrogen macam methane, ethane, so on and so forth, you can actually burn these gases. Okay. So that's for gas. Okay, if your system has gaseous waste or even raw material, macam saya kata kalau you guna syngas pun, okay, takkan semua akan digunakan, akan ada yang tak reacted. So please consider what you want to do with it. So tapi I think for syngas, you can just purge, release. But if your gases are toxic, you have to consider treating it first. Okay, next, liquid waste. So I think most of us will have this problem, right? Kita ada liquid waste. So what we can do if you have liquid waste, chemical waste liquids except aqueous. So kalau kamu ada liquid waste, and liquid waste kamu tak ada air. Kalau ada air tak boleh, mesti liquid waste yang tak ada air. That's why they say aqueous. If you have this, you can actually incinerate. Okay, you can say incinerate in an incinerator to destroy the harmful compounds that may be formed, such as dioxin when burning chlorinated compounds. So let's say if you have chlorinated compounds, ada Cl, okay. Kalau kamu bakar macam tu je tak boleh. You have to actually burn it in an incinerator, because incinerator temperature can goes up to more than 1000 Celsius. So that when you burn this chemical, even if they produce toxic gases, these gases will also be incinerated completely. Ni takkan ada sebarang penghasilan gas ataupun apa-apa. Dia terus terbakar completely. Okay. But kalau ada air tak boleh. Logik lah, air kalau kamu burn, you cannot burn water. Okay, memang takkan berlaku. So if you have aqueous, it cannot be done unless you separate out dulu air tu, then baru kamu nak incinerate, maybe can. Okay, so the incinerator emission can be scrubbed and acid gases neutralized. So biasanya kalau gas yang toxic ni, dia akan guna scrubber lah, so that then you will not release these gases to the atmosphere. Okay, so if you are liquid waste, again, kamu kena identify apa je liquid waste kamu. Kalau kamu decide nak incinerate, then you have to decide it and mention in your report. But the incinerator part, kamu tak payah letak dalam PFD. Okay, you don't need to put in the PFD, but you have to state in the report. Okay, incinerator. Katakan kamu tak ada incinerator sendiri. Okay, you can use outside incinerator, ada je. Again, the concept, identify where is the incinerator, so on and so forth. Okay, alright. So that's why actually every student part in the design is not easy. So perhaps if you think student 3 rasa student 4 tu senang, student 4 tu rasa student 2 tu senang, actually each part is actually quite tough on its own. Right, so next, what about aqueous waste? Tadi saya kata kita boleh guna incinerator, but incinerator tak boleh digunakan untuk chemicals yang ada water. So what do we do? So for aqueous waste, you have also a few ways. Okay, either you do if your aqueous waste has suspended solid, so bayangkan kamu punya aqueous waste tu ada campuran bahan kimia, campuran air, campuran solid. So you can remove the suspended solid by settling using clarifier. Okay, so using clarifier, senang kan pemisahan liquid solid? Paling senang. Solid is heavy, they will settle down. So you can already separate the liquid and solid. So now your aqueous waste no longer have the solid. Next, you can also use pH. So let's say kalau kamu punya waste tu adalah highly acidic or highly alkaline. So you just use either alkali or acid to neutralize dia. So usually kalau acidic ni kita guna lime. Lime is the cheapest, easiest chemical yang you can use to adjust the pH. So let's say you have a treatment pond, okay, you have to adjust the pH, right? So normally they will use lime lah. That's the easiest one. Toxicity, okay, so you have to ensure if your aqueous waste is highly toxic, you can dilute it. So, cara nak dilute, tambah je air. So, you add more water, you can dilute. So, the toxicity will be reduced. Okay, tapi of course that means the volume will be more, or you might need to use certain chemical treatment. So, again, as I mentioned, tak semua ni akan applicable kepada plant kamu. So, it really depends on your plant. Okay, so certain plant, dia mungkin gaseous waste. Certain plant may be solid waste. Certain plant may be aqueous, non-aqueous. So, again, please pesan to your friend, tak boleh discuss general sebab a few semesters memang ramai student yang discuss general. So, then they don't get quite good marks. Sebab as I told you, they mesti discuss in specific to your plant. Okay, next you may also check based on the BOD, the biological oxygen demand. So in fact, follows our government authorities. If you, let's say, you want to release your water or your waste to the normal drainage or to the river, you have to follow certain BOD and also COD punya standard. So kamu tak boleh just release. So you have to treat. You check the BOD, you check the COD. Kalau dia dah okay, then only you can release. So normally kalau nak adjust on the BOD, dia akan guna activated sludge lah. Activated sludge ni basically microorganism. So microorganism ni apa kan dia akan buat? Basically they're going to eat on your waste too. So they will convert it into something else. So this will reduce the BOD of your waste. So that's also another way that you may want to consider. Tapi kalau menggunakan activated staff process ni, confirm lah kena ada your own treatment pond. Okay, you definitely have to have your own treatment pond in your plant, which is quite common sebenarnya for chemical companies to have that. Okay, solid waste. So solid waste paling senang burn je lah dalam incinerator, or you may bury it at landfill site. Tapi kamu kena ingat, if you want to incinerate or you want to bury it in the landfill, it's not free. It comes with a price. You have to pay. So it means it will incur cost to your plant for these two alternative. And please remember, you have to mention specifically kat mana. Okay, so that's why the good thing about industrial zone, most likely they already prepared these facilities for you. So of course at a cost, but it is convenient. So let's say kalau tak ada, katakan kamu pilih kawasan non-industrial zone, you have to consider where are the nearest places if let's say you need these facilities. Okay, done on chemical, on the waste. Now we're talking about noise. So you also must then remember your plant not necessarily is only about waste. Okay, when we talk about environmental impact, bukan sahaja pasal waste. Dia juga pasal noise. You may have noise from your plant. Example, compressor, air cooler, fan. Okay, so you identify in your plant, if you're using compressor, air cooler, fan mesti ada lah kan. If you have a lot of compressor, if you're working with high pressure system, if your plant is operating at high pressure, then definitely you have a lot of compressor. This compressor is also a source of noise. So again, next, venting through steam, relief valve can be noisy. Okay, so what do we do? So you have to check the vendor specification. Tapi normally, this equipment has complied to the noise level punya requirement. Tapi as you know, as the years that you use your equipment, definitely the noise level will increase lah kan, due to wear and tear. So what can you do if you have a noisy equipment? Nanti dalam kamu punya plan layout tu, kamu try to arrange lah so that this noisy equipment, macam compressor, so on and so forth, you will place it not near to the boundary of the plant. Maksudnya janganlah letak compressor tu bersebelahan, berdekatan dengan kawasan luar. You have to put it perhaps somewhere in the middle to muffle down the noise. Okay, and certain companies, certain plant, they will have screen. So they can have screen to reduce the noise outside the site. Okay, so there's also one way to reduce it. Next, visual impact. So how do you want your plant to look a little bit nicer or to have the impact that visually it looks good? So maybe you don't consider this. Mungkin kita pun tak terfikirkan bila nak bina plant, chemical plant, the visual impact of your plant towards the public or even towards the company itself. How you're going to make sure that the impact is good? So you have to consider this when you are designing. So large equipment, okay, like storage tank can be painted to match or contrast the environment, or landscaping and tree skinning can also enhance the site appearance. Sebab tu kamu tengok biasanya kalau chemical plant kan, the new ones normally they will have all this landscape to make it look nice. Supaya one thing is to change the perception of the local communities. You must understand that most of the time when you're building a chemical plant, it will cause concern to the communities, to the public. Sebab in their mind, most of the time, in fact, even us, we probably think that, oh, kilang kimia ni menghasilkan bahan pencemar. Okay, of course, as a local community, you will worry about that. Okay, so by having a good landscape, perhaps it can change the impression of the community that this is a safe plant and that it will not cause any harm to them. Okay, so next, okay, so that's all on environmental impact. Okay, so ada dua part kan. So first part, environmental impact. Now the second part is on safety consideration. So again, safety consideration ni sebenarnya banyak. And you have already learned in safety course also. So what I'm going to discuss is general one, tetapi memang ada banyak sangat. Okay, so as I told you, it doesn't mean all is applicable to your plant, but you must really analyze your plant what are the safety consideration specifically to your plant. So bila kamu discuss, memang kamu kena spesifik kepada plant kamu dan tak boleh secara general. Okay, so this safety first, safety in the process design. So you have to consider when you're starting now designing your plant, designing the process, you have to identify this aspect. First of all, identification, assessment of the hazard. So sekarang bila kamu dah ada PFD, hopefully by next week kita dah boleh start buat PFD. Okay, so for those who come today, for next week homework, actually I wanted to tell yesterday, saya ingatkan nak beritahu semalam, tapi saya rasa better today. The homework for next week consultation is block diagram mesti dah complete. Okay, as I told you semalam kan, block diagram mesti complete. Kalau possible, dah kena start on PFD. The best ideal one will be kalau dah siap PFD tu. Tak siap sepenuhnya pun tak apa, at least susunan equipment tu dah ada untuk keseluruhan proses. So, I just want to see first the arrangement of the equipment. Kalau tak boleh siap semua pun tak apa, at least main equipment. So, kalau tak sempat nak letak heat exchanger, tak sempat nak letak compressor, expander is fine. But at least PFD tu dah ada main equipment dengan certain streamline dah ada. Okay, so that will be the homework for next week consultation. Please remind the people, your friends that did not come for today lecture. Okay, so itu adalah kerja rumah minggu depan, right? So for consultation. Okay, next I go back to this. Control of the hazard. So dah identify hazard dia, you have to know what are the ways for you to control the hazard. Terutamanya flammable and toxic materials. Sebab tu untuk part ni, student 4, you're supposed to work with student 2. Sebab student 2 kan buat on the chemical physical properties, and student 2 pun ada juga MSDS dia. So by right, student 2 dah boleh work together with student 4 to identify what are actually the flammable and toxic materials. Sebab student 2 akan discuss raw material, produk, side product juga. So student 2 yang akan tahu sebenarnya apakah jenis chemicals that will be flammable and toxic. So that student 4 dia akan dah boleh discuss apa cara untuk dia control these hazards. Okay, so kamu kena beza dua benda. Tadi pasal waste, sekarang pasal safety pula of the chemicals that you produce or you use. Okay, next is control of the process. So kamu kena tengok juga dalam proses kamu, what will be the equipments or the system that may cause safety issues. So for example, normally memanglah high pressure, high temperature punya equipment are often the one that causes a lot of concern. Macam incinerate, if you're using a furnace, you're using boiler, so on and so forth, this one normally will cause a lot of safety issue. So that's why the strategy will be control system, alarm and trips. So you have all these control system, a good control system, a good alarm will ensure that if there's any emergency, it can be addressed as fast as possible. Okay. Next, limitation of loss. So if let's say something does occur, what are you going to do to limit the loss? So this can be using pressure relief, plant layout, provision of firefighting equipment. So kalau berlaku juga something bad to the plant, what are your strategies to ensure this can be minimized? So of course equipment kena ada pressure release valve, like I told you just not ada burst disc ataupun relief valve, supaya if over pressure it will burst, then they will release the pressure out to the atmosphere to avoid explosion in your vessel. Sebab tu dalam vessel, high pressure vessel, this is a must. Next, your plant layout tu for student 3. So student 3 kamu dah kena dalam plant layout, you have to ensure in your plant tu mana emergency exit dia. So by right you have to do this in your plant layout. Okay, site layout kamu kena identify tempat berkumpul. Okay, for example like every location we have a gathering place. So if there's emergency, people will know where to gather. One, tu plan layout. Tu site layout. Kalau plan layout pula, where is your emergency exit and where is your firefighting equipment will be placed in your plant. Okay, so itu adalah sebenarnya kerja student 3. That's why I said student 3, student 4 kena bekerjasama sebab if student 4 cakap, okay, in the plan there will be emergency exit. I will go to student 3 punya part, I tengok dalam dia punya plan layout tu ada tak emergency exit. So kalau tak ada, then you will not get the mark. So it has to be synchronized both parties when you are doing the report on this. Okay, so next one, general process hazard. So tadi we talk in general, now we talk about just in regards to process hazard. So ada chemical hazard, process hazard, nanti later ada lagi yang sebenarnya. Okay, so for process hazard, in general your process, you have to first check, are you using exothermic chemical reaction? Adakah dalam reaktor kamu tu, dia tindak balas yang membebaskan haba atau menyerap haba, absorb or release heat. So kalau dia adalah reaction that release heat, then you have to check because this is a safety hazard. Okay, it can cause safety issue. If it's endothermic process pun sama juga. Endothermic process adalah equipment yang memerlukan heat. So either this heat come from steam ke, whatever it is. So endothermic process will be high temperature process. So high temperature process pun you have to ensure what are your safety measures for it. Material handling and transfer. So if you what kind of material that you're transferring and you're handling daripada storage kepada kamu punya masuk ke dalam proses, liquid ke, gas ke, solid ke, how you ensure this handling and transfer. Next, indoor enclosed or indoor process unit. So are your process unit going to place outside or inside the plant? It also depends. Next, access of emergency equipment, drainage and spill control. So a good plant shall have a good drainage system to ensure that the spill can be minimized and controlled. Okay, now next, special process hazard. So tadi ni general one means applicable to most of the plant. The next one are the special one, meaning it might be applicable to some, it might be applicable, but it might not be applicable to all. So this involve toxic material, sub-atmospheric pressure. You might be surprised, certain equipment is sub-atmospheric, meaning less than your atmosphere pressure atmosphere. So kalau ni means kamu ada special consideration untuk case macam ni. Operation near flammable range. So kamu check equipment kamu, ada tak yang menggunakan equipment near the flammable range? Kenapa? Kalau ni kalau you are using near flammable range means dia ada kemungkinan boleh flammable. So kamu tahu that cause fire. So you have to consider ada tak equipment yang berjalan dalam near the flammable range of the chemicals. Okay, dust explosion. If you're using solid, is there any possibilities of dust explosion? Relief pressure. So relief pressure ni of course as I told you, kalau kamu menggunakan high pressure system, so relief pressure is also a concern. And low temperature. For these three project, I rasa tak ada project yang menggunakan low temperature, so not a problem. Toxic material definitely lah. I know all three plants have toxic chemicals. I think dust, maybe I think one group uses solid might have this problem. If you don't do solid, you don't have this problem. So again, as I told you, pada yang ada bawa data dalam kelas ni, what I give is in general, but when you discuss, you have to discuss in specific to your plant and choose what is relevant to your plant. Okay, next one, this is still under process hazard. So ni contoh process hazard yang kamu kena kenal pasti. Quantity of flammable material. Are you using flammable material? And if you are you going to use a lot or are you going to produce a lot? Okay, sometimes you might use flammable material. Sometimes you may produce flammable material. So you have to identify and discuss. Next, corrosion, erosion. Okay, this also quite common lah. Okay, corrosion, erosion, leakage joint and packing. Okay, use of fired heater. So if your plant, I think one group has a furnace, which is actually fired heater lah. Furnace tu fired heater. So you will have to discuss about it. Hot all heat exchange system. So if you're using heat exchanger and you're using oil as your heating fluid, okay, you have to consider that as well. And if you have rotating equipment, ni mesti ada. Siapa guna compressor, siapa guna centrifuge, siapa guna mixer, will have this process hazard. Okay, so again, kalau siapa yang confused untuk part ni, kamu identify apa process hazard yang berkaitan dengan plant kamu. Okay, you just identify first what are the hazard and explain lah, okay, in related to that hazard. Okay. Now that you discuss dah kan, what is your process hazard, kamu dah kena pasti process hazard dia. Then next part, you kena discuss what are your preventive and protective measure. This sama macam tadi waste. Waste, kamu identify, kita minimize, tak boleh minimize mana kita nak treat. Itu untuk environmental impact. So untuk safety consideration pun sama. Identify dulu apa kind of safety hazard. Dan lepas tu identify what will you do to prevent and to protect. So these are the examples of it. So let's say you kata adequate secure water supply for firefighting. So katakanlah you think that your plant has a lot of safety issues, safety hazards that might cause katakan fire. So you may consider having your own firefighting unit. So katakan kamu nak firefighting unit, kamu kena make sure student 3 yang buat site layout tu, dia kena letak dalam dia punya site layout firefighting unit if let's say you need to have it. Okay, correct structural design of vessel, piping, steelwork. So this is general lah. This is of course applicable to all. Make sure design vessel kamu, kalau kamu menggunakan high pressure, high temperature, design dia adalah proper. So you can put it. This is quite general but it is applicable to your plant. Pressure relief device. So your device, your equipment yang ada pressure tinggi, kamu ada pressure relief valve. So kita guna pressure relief valve atau kita guna bursting disc. So maksudnya bila ada over pressure je, dia akan burst. So they will release the pressure out. Corrosion resistant material, adequate corrosion allowances. So you can discuss in general, tetapi later dalam design project 2, when you're already designing the equipment, you have to come back to this. Sebab tu bila kamu akan tengok balik juga sebenarnya design report 1, sebab kamu akan perasan, okay, equipment mana yang memerlukan certain kind of design features. Katakan dia adalah high temperature ataupun dia akan menyebabkan corrosion. So kamu punya material construction tu kamu dah kena pilih accordingly. Okay, segregation of reactive material. If you are using materials that is may be reacting with one another. So katakan kamu punya produk ke side produk kamu ni ada tendency untuk react, let's say dengan your raw material, so on and so forth. So dalam storage tank tu kamu dah consider, kamu kena pisahkan dia ke, make sure there's a proper segregation so that they won't react with one another. Sebab this reaction can be potentially harmful. Okay, so you have to consider that. Mungkin kalau kamu tak separate betul-betul, dia bertindak balas, dia menghasilkan gas yang toxic. It can be, you know. So you have to consider that as well. Electrical equipment, earthing of electrical equipment. Safe location of your electrical equipment, backup utility supply, compliance with national code and standard, fail-safe instrumentation. So normally, instrument ni, they will have more than one fail-safe measures or mechanism. Means katakan kalau satu mechanism tu fail, dia ada backup mechanism to ensure that equipment tu, proses tu takkan fail. Okay, so there's always, they call it double fail-safe mechanism lah to ensure kalau satu fail, satu benda fail, ada lagi satu backup to make sure equipment tu tak fail completely. Okay. Next, this is more examples of the preventive and protective measures. Okay, provision of emergency vehicles, adequate drainage, insulation of hot surfaces. So katakan kamu ada boiler ataupun kamu ada reactor dengan high temperature, you can consider discussing insulation. Kamu nak insulate kamu punya hot surface, safe design, location of safe control room as I explained yesterday. Position, location, control room pun penting. Separation of hazardous equipment, block valve, fire protection of fire equipment, then no glass equipment used for flammable or hazardous material. Okay, next one. Okay, next is the checklist. So tadi the measures, right? Now we talk about the checklist on your design safety. So design safety punya checklist. So design safety checklist pun ada banyak. Okay, dia ada materials, dia ada equipment, so on and so forth. Okay, so for materials, these are the one that you need to check. But basically, kalau kamu perasan, materials ni punya checklist, student tu dia dah ada sebenarnya. Sebab student tu dia dah buat pasal chemical physical properties. So, checklist untuk materials ni sebenarnya you can actually get it from student tu. Sebab student tu dah ada physical chemical properties and student tu dah ada MSDS. So by right from there you can already do all these checklists by referring to student 2. Okay, sebab sebenarnya student 4 pun dia nampak macam banyak tapi I told you tak semestinya semua applicable to your plan. So you may need to look at your plan and you see what are relevant to be discussed for your plan. Okay, for the process, okay, these are for the reactors. So kalau kamu punya plan mesti ada reactor. All three groups have reactor. You have to consider this checklist for your reactor. Is it isothermic reaction, temperature control, site reaction, contamination, unusual concentration, corrosion. This is for reactors. This is for pressure system. So kalau pressure system, do you need a high pressure system? Sebab tu macam bila kamu nak pilih proses, one of the consideration, do we need a high pressure system? Okay, if you need, macam contohnya reactor tu tak ada choice lah. Kalau reaction tu memerlukan tekanan tinggi, there's no choice. But if there is other kinds of equipment that may be high pressure, you may need to consider, is there a need? Next, your design to the current codes, material construction, pressure relief and the safe venting system. Okay, so kamu confused ke macam nak discuss kan? For this part, sebab at this project report 1, some parts are still not yet finalized. So you may have to discuss certain parts somewhat general sebab kita tak finalize lagi. Contohnya macam material construction, of course you cannot discuss specifically the material construction for your pressure system will be this. But you may need to discuss, for example, kamu dah tahu at this stage berapa pressure untuk kamu punya equipment tu. Katakan kamu guna compressor, you know your compressor will be working at let's say 20 megapascal. So you just check kalau 20 megapascal, what are usually the material of construction. So you discuss macam tu lah. Okay, so you discuss in general. Okay, for the compressors in the plant, they are working at a range of let's say 10 to 20 megapascal. Hence, the material of construction will be blah 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 blah. Macam tu pun dah cukup. It's enough already. So means you are aware you have all these high pressure system, what kind of construction material that you will use. So you also can talk about having a good pressure relief system. So you will say that to ensure the safety of the pressure system in the plant, they will be equipped with pressure relief system. Okay, if you can give example, so on and so forth. Okay. Okay, so that's example how are you going to do this safety consideration. So again, why I keep reminding sebab you cannot discuss in general untuk semua plan. Kamu kena discuss in particularly to your plan. So kalau plan kamu ada high pressure system, baru kamu discuss. Kalau tak ada, tak payah discuss. Okay, next, control system. So control system, you have to have all these are the criteria that you have to check. For example, fail safe, backup power supply, high-low alarm, so on and so forth. So by right, yang ni memang kamu dah pernah buat. Kamu dah pernah belajar in your safety, so I don't go further. But these are also the factors to consider for your control system of the plant. Next, storage. Okay, so again, kalau kamu tak ada sebarang storage, tak apa. But if you have storage of your raw material or your product, these are the things that you have to discuss. Okay, limit, the quantity limit, the floating roof tanks, loading, unloading facilities, ignition source, vehicle. So maksudnya kamu kena ensure lah your storage area tu taklah terlalu dekat dengan parking area. So on and so forth. Next one. General. So just now this is storage. This is in general. So banyak kan dia punya safety consideration. So as I told you, I keep repeating this. So saya tak nak kamu rasa macam kamu kena address semua. Kamu tak payah address semua. Okay, kalau bagi saya yang penting, kamu address apa yang paling significant for your plant. Okay, chemicals, equipment, process and the general one. So pick up few points that you think is relevant, important to your plan. Tapi I do admit it's impossible nak fikir semua sebab at this stage kamu baru mula nak buat. It's very impossible to consider everything. So don't make it, janganlah tulis terlalu panjang sebab kalau kamu buat secara general memang akan rasa terbeban sebab banyak sangat. Tapi kalau kamu pick up the important one, significant one, actually dia tak akan jadi panjang sebenarnya report tu sebab report tu akan terus directly hit to your plan punya requirement. Okay. Next, fire protection. So again, kalau your case you have flammable materials or you have tendency of having fire, so these are the checklists that you have to discuss. So emergency water supply, fire main, foam system, sprinkler, so on and so forth. Next one. So this all for today. So fire protection, general list. Saya rasa ada lagi. Okay, done. Oh, tak ada dah. Alright. So this is for the environmental impact and safety consideration. Okay, so by today, minggu ketiga, I have already completed the lecture for part 1. Okay, part 2 belum. Part 2 saya akan buat lepas sem break. So means for the next minggu 4, 5, 6, 7, 4 weeks, you will not have any lecture. So the 3 hours are free for you to actually do design. So that's my strategy. I finish lecture cepat. Dan yang penting ada 4 minggu tu ada 3 jam. You have about 12 hours to really concentrate on doing your design project. Okay, so for next week consultation, if possible, yang wajib block diagram kena wajib siap. Tak payah buat dalam PowerPoint cantik-cantik pun. You want to do in Word pun okay, but as long as I can see the block diagram, and please make sure you can explain the block diagram tu. 1. Okay, 2, if you can start on the PFD, sebab kalau possible, please start on the PFD. Tak boleh siap complete pun tak apa, but at least the main equipments and some of the streamlines, and you have to be able to explain as well the PFD. Okay, so that then later baru kita discuss nak letak auxiliary equipment, nak discuss pasal susunan, and so on and so forth. So for everyone, I've already shared the link to the Microsoft Visio. Please use Microsoft Visio for the PFD, but if you have any other software, but please choose software yang ada yang simbol-simbol tu. Macam Visio memang dia ada simbol-simbol ni, senang. If you choose software yang tak ada simbol-simbol ni, kamu kena create pula ataupun kamu kena draw balik. So it takes a lot of time. Okay, so that's all for today. So I will see you next week for the consultation. Thank you everyone.